Question 1. The narrator provides the clause, "that was as much a matter of course as breathing," in lines 9 and 10, most probably as what? If you've read through this passage and gotten the gist of it, you know that right here in the beginning, Louisa overhears what we can infer is some type of a romantic meeting between Louisa's fiancé, Joe Daggett, and another girl, Lily Dyer. After Louisa overhears this exchange, she goes home, and this part of the passage describes her activity the next day. The next day, she did her housework methodically. That was as much a matter of course as breathing, but she did not sew on her wedding clothes. So that was as much a matter of course as breathing is talking about the fact that she did her housework and that doing her housework is as much a habit for her as breathing is, it seems. So our answer choices are asking us why the narrator provides this clause. Our first choice is A, a parenthetical observation that characterizes Louisa. First of all, you should know, if you don't, that a parenthetical phrase or clause does not have to actually be in parentheses. A parenthetical remark is simply a word, clause, phrase, or some such inserted as an explanation or afterthought into a passage that is grammatically complete without it. It can be set off with parentheses, commas, semicolons, dashes, whatever. So what we have here is indeed a parenthetical observation. It's set off between semicolons here, and the rest of the sentence here, is grammatically complete without it. The next day, she did her housework methodically, but she did not sew on her wedding clothes. This clause also characterizes Louisa. It tells us something about her as a character, that she's a tidy or neat person, that she's a person of habit, that even learning about her fiancé's interest in another woman doesn't shake her from her routine of doing the housework that needs to be done. So this answer fits very well. B, a subtle indication that Louisa was too old-fashioned. This answer implies that there's some sort of judgment on the part of the narrator, a criticism that hints that Louisa's actions, doing her housework no matter what, is too old-fashioned. We're required to evaluate the tone of the narrator in order to accept or reject this response. We don't have any diction or anything else here that suggests criticism. The narrator simply tells us that this activity is as natural to Louisa as breathing, but there is neither praise nor criticism implied, so we cannot support this answer. C, an exaggeration for the sake of ridiculing Louisa. We can probably safely assume that this is an exaggeration. To say that something is as natural as breathing is almost always exaggeration or hyperbole. But to say that the narrator is doing it for the sake of ridiculing Louisa has the same problem as the last answer choice. It implies that the narrator has a critical or ridiculing tone here, and that's simply not the case. There is no judgment of Louisa in the narrator's tone, nothing to indicate that the intent is to criticize or ridicule her. So this answer, like the last one, is not supported by the passage. D, a critical commentary that undercuts Louisa's own remarks. And here we have the same problem. No criticism is implied, and nothing about this undercuts anything that Louisa says in this passage. So this answer is completely insupportable. E, an aside to the reader about the importance of habits. This really has the same problem as the last three incorrect answers. This is still requiring us to analyze the narrator's tone, and just as the narrator doesn't criticize, the narrator doesn't praise either. Habits might be important, but we can't know that from this passage. All we can really know is that this habit is somehow important to Louisa, and that doesn't tell us about habits as much as it tells us about Louisa herself, which takes us back to the correct answer, A, because this clause is provided as a parenthetical observation that characterizes Louisa. Question 2, in lines 16 and 17, that she had heard aright refers to Louisa's belief that what? We really already considered this as we answered the last question, in which we assumed that in reading this passage you would have gotten the gist of it. But now let's look back at it and see what that gist is and how we know. The lines in question, in context, come as Louisa is preparing for and having a conversation with Joe about their engagement. She has spent the day thinking about something she overheard between Joe Daggett and Lily Dyer, and now she's decided what to do. The lines read, In the evening, Joe came. Louisa Ellis had never known that she had any diplomacy in her, but when she came to look for it that night, she found it, although meek of its kind, among her little feminine weapons. Even now, she could hardly believe that she had heard aright, and that she would not do Joe a terrible injury should she break her troth plight. So Louisa has heard something that she can hardly believe she heard aright, and she's concerned that she will do Joe an injustice if she breaks her troth plight or her engagement, her promise to marry him. So whatever she heard is a reason to break her engagement. If we look at our answers, we see A, Joe has spoken rudely to Lily, doesn't really make sense. For one thing, there's nothing in Lily's remarks in the first paragraph that seem as if she's responding to rudeness. There's this exclamation and soft commotion, and then Lily sounds as if she has risen, saying, "This must be put a stop to. We've stayed here long enough. I'm going home." None of this sounds obviously like a response to rudeness. And besides that, for Louisa to break her engagement to Joe because Joe was rude to someone else seems a little extreme. Also, later in the passage, after Louisa has broken her engagement to Joe, she notices Lily Dyer as tall and erect and blooming. So she notices Lily's beauty here, not that Lily seems to have had her feelings hurt. We can't support A from the passage. B, she has certainly misconstrued Joe's remarks. Even though she can hardly believe she heard aright, there's nothing to indicate that she really didn't hear correctly or that she really didn't think she'd heard correctly. She goes through with breaking off her engagement to Joe, which indicates that she's actually pretty sure that she heard right. C, she has perhaps spoken too candidly. What she can hardly believe she heard aright doesn't have anything to do with whether or not she herself has spoken too candidly or too truthfully, too straightforwardly. So this answer doesn't really make sense. D, Joe has confessed his love for Louisa. It does not fit the sequence of events here that what she can hardly believe she has heard aright is Joe's confession of love for her, Louisa. For one thing, it doesn't fit at all with the brief description of the exchange with Joe and Lily in the first paragraph, and for another thing, it doesn't make a lot of sense that she would break off her engagement to Joe because he confessed that he loved her. This answer isn't supportable. E, Joe has an intimate relationship with Lily. This, of course, is the answer that fits the context best. The first paragraph description of the exchange involving Lily Dyer, the fact that Louisa breaks off her engagement to Joe, and the description close to the end of the passage here of Lily as tall, erect, and blooming are all part of the clues to the unstated fact that Joe Daggett is, in fact, involved in some kind of intimate relationship with Lily Dyer. Question 3. Lines 15 through 23 chiefly serve to show that Louisa was capable of what? So let's read through those lines along with the lines immediately preceding them to get more of the context. Louisa Ellis had never known that she had any diplomacy in her, but when she came to look for it that night, she found it, although meek of its kind, among her little feminine weapons. Even now, she could hardly believe that she had heard aright, and that she would not do Joe a terrible injury should she break her troth plight. She wanted to sound him without betraying too soon her own inclinations in the matter. She did it successfully, and they finally came to an understanding, but it was a difficult thing, for he was as afraid of betraying himself as she. A, directing a conversation with discretion and subtlety. Louisa wants to sound Joe, or find out what he's thinking without revealing her own inclinations or what she wants to do in the matter. In the lines preceding this, we see that she looked for and found diplomacy, or the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way, among her little feminine weapons. It is that weapon, that diplomacy, that she uses to sound Joe without revealing her own feelings too soon, and she manages it successfully, leading to an understanding between them, in spite of the fact that it was a difficult thing because of Joe's own fear of revealing his own inclinations. So all of this certainly shows that Louisa is capable of A, directing a conversation with discretion and subtlety. This is a very supportable answer. B, sympathizing with others regardless of her own pain. Interestingly, we don't get any language here that indicates that Louisa is in pain. She does want to avoid doing Joe a terrible injury by breaking their engagement, so we can gather that she is sympathetic to him. But if we look further down in the passage, we see that not only is she not in pain because of the breakup of this relationship, she is looking forward to the future. She gazed ahead through a long reach of future days strung together like pearls in a rosary, every one like the others, and all smooth and flawless and innocent, and her heart went up in thankfulness. So, this answer can't be supported by the passage. C. Equivocating without knowing it. Equivocating is using ambiguous language or being vague in order to conceal the truth or keep from committing oneself. This is not the same at all as diplomacy, which is the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way. In the lines in question, she wants to sound Joe without betraying her own inclinations or feelings about what she wants to do, and she did it successfully. Furthermore, going back a few lines, her diplomacy is something she looked for and found among her little feminine weapons. So Louisa isn't equivocating, she's succeeding at diplomacy, even though it's a difficult thing, and she doesn't do anything here without knowing it. So we can't support this answer. D. Being forceful when the occasion demanded it. Diplomacy is not being forceful. In fact, it's close to the opposite, so this answer is not supported by the text. E. Fluctuating in her resolve, yet maintaining appearances. We don't get any indication that she's fluctuating in her resolve. She is exercising diplomacy to sound Joe and reach an understanding with him, and she is successful. This answer is insupportable as well, and the best response is that these lines show that Louisa is capable of A. Directing a conversation with discretion and subtlety. Question 4. In lines 22 and 23, he was as afraid of betraying himself as she is best interpreted to mean that what? A. Joe feared that Louisa was determined to reject him. It seems clear from the passage that Joe isn't fearful of Louisa's rejection. In lines 28 through 32, he says that he thinks it's better this way, although he would have stuck with her till his dying day if she had wanted to keep on. So he thinks that this breakup is the best idea, and he's honest enough to say it. B. Both Louisa and Joe hesitated to express their true desires. Notice that Louisa wants to sound Joe without too soon betraying her own inclinations or what she wants in the matter. And then we find out that Joe was afraid of betraying himself as she. So this answer is supportable. They're both hesitating to express their true inclinations or desires. C. Louisa was frightened that she had lost Joe's love. No, we don't get anything about Louisa being frightened of losing Joe's love. She doesn't want to betray her own inclinations too soon, and Joe doesn't want to do so either. There's nothing to indicate that Louisa is fearful of losing Joe's love, and in fact, later in the passage, we get that she is indeed glad about being out of the relationship, so we can eliminate this answer. D. Both Joe and Louisa had been betrayed by Lily. This answer is way off base. There's nothing at all to support this. E. Joe feared that Lily had betrayed him to Louisa. There's nothing in Joe's being afraid of betraying himself as she, Louisa, that hints that Joe feared that Lily had betrayed him to Louisa. We can't support this answer either. And the only supportable response is B. Both Louisa and Joe hesitated to express their true desires. Question 5. The dominant element of Joe and Louisa's meeting in lines 11 through 44 is what? So we're looking at this part here all the way through here, and we want to know the dominant element of this meeting between these two. A growing sense of betrayal on Louisa's part. We start off these lines with Louisa meditating, and then we learn that she successfully uses diplomacy to reach an understanding with Joe, and then we see that the understanding that they reach involves breaking off their engagement. And then after talking about it, they part more tenderly than they had done for a long time. They have a last great wave of regretful memory that sweeps over them. And Joe basically says he'll be there if she ever needs him. Her face quivers a little, so obviously she's on the verge of tears. Joe kisses her, and then he leaves. There is no sense of growing betrayal on Louisa's part here. She is successful in negotiating and understanding with Joe. And if we look past these lines, we see that the next morning she feels like a queen who, after fearing lest her domain be wrested away from her, sees it firmly insured in her possession. She sees the beautiful Lily Dyer but feels no qualm. She is happy. So this answer can't be supported. B. Tactfulness on both of their parts. Louisa seeks and uses diplomacy. She doesn't want to betray her own inclinations or what she wants too soon, and Joe doesn't want to either. Louisa doesn't want to do Joe a terrible injury. She doesn't mention what she heard with Lily Dyer. She blames herself, saying that she has no cause of complaint against him, but that she has lived so long one way that she shrinks from making a change. Joe thinks the breakup is for the best, that it's better this way, but he would have stuck with her till his dying day if she wanted to keep on and go through with the marriage. Then they part tenderly. Joe says he'll be there if she needs him. They kiss. Neither of these two want to hurt the other one, but it's clear that they both deep down want out of this relationship. So yes, B, tactfulness on both of their parts is certainly a dominant element here. C, shared yearning. There's only this one moment when the last great wave of regretful memory sweeps over them that might be construed as shared yearning. So it's certainly not a dominant element. Of course, they each have a desire to be out of the relationship with the other, but that's not really a shared yearning. Joe might yearn for his freedom or yearn for Lily, and Louisa might yearn for a solitary life, but they aren't sharing a yearning. Only the desire maybe to each pursue their separate yearnings. So this answer is not really supportable. D, mutual passion. Again, no. Neither of them really indicate any passion in particular in this exchange they have with each other, but if they did, their passions are separate. E, possessiveness on Joe's part. We've already seen that Joe thinks that it's better this way, that breaking up is the best thing to do. So we can't support this answer either. And the best answer is that the dominant element in Joe and Louisa's meeting is B, tactfulness on both of their parts. Question 6. The images in lines 50 through 59 suggest that what? And let's read over the lines in question. Now the tall weeds and grasses might cluster around Caesar's little hermit hut. The snow might fall on its roof year in and year out, but he never would go on a rampage through the unguarded village. Now the little canary might turn itself into a peaceful yellow ball night after night and have no need to wake and flutter with wild terror against its bars. Louisa could sew linens and distill roses and dust and polish and fold away in lavender as long as she listed. So this comes right after the narrator tells us that Louisa's feelings after her breakup with Joe are like those of a queen who, after fearing lest her domain should be wrested from her, sees it firmly insured in her possession. Now, the bit about her dog here, we know Caesar is her dog from the footnote. This might seem a little ambiguous, and possibly to know exactly why Caesar won't go on a rampage through the village would require us to read more of the story. But fortunately, we have the rest of these lines to help us answer this question. The point here is that Caesar going on a rampage through the village would be a negative thing, and now in this imagined future, he will never be doing that. The canary might turn himself into a peaceful yellow ball night after night and not wake up in terror. Louisa can sew linen seams and distill roses and dust and polish and fold away in lavender, or put things away in lavender scent, as long as she listed or as long as she liked. The passage tells us now this is possible. This is what is going to happen now, after her breakup with Joe. These images of what will happen now are peaceful. The things that she seemed to have imagined for the future earlier include her little dog Caesar going on a rampage in the village and her canary waking up in terror in the night. And these things are not peaceful. So based on that, answer A, Louisa had been quite troubled by the prospect of matrimony, is quite reasonable. The idea of getting married was causing her to imagine these stressful images, these troubling situations. But now the future images are peaceful. So this is a well-supported answer. B, Louisa envisions her future as bleak and uneventful. While the kinds of things that are listed might seem very mundane, cleaning, polishing, sewing, folding clothes, the language here doesn't suggest bleakness. The words used here, distilling roses, folding away in lavender, are pleasant, peaceful words, not bleak ones. And the passage says that she will be able to do these things as long as she listed, or as long as she wanted to, which implies that she would want to, that she likes to engage in these activities. So we certainly can't support this answer. C. Joe had abandoned both Lily and Louisa and left the region. There's nothing in these lines that suggests anything about Joe leaving the region. Joe left Louisa's house back in line 44, and that's all we know. These lines don't tell us any more about his activity. D. Louisa and Joe anticipated a blissful future together as husband and wife. These lines don't tell us anything about what Joe had anticipated. They do hint that Louisa was not anticipating a blissful future earlier, before the breakup, because of the implied earlier anticipation of Caesar's rampaging through the village and the canary waking in terror. This answer doesn't fit with the passage. E. Lily had effectively isolated Louisa from community life. There's nothing in these lines to indicate that Lily Dyer has isolated Louisa from community life. Lily isn't mentioned until the next few lines, where Louisa feels no qualm about her. She isn't having negative feelings about Lily. And these lines don't indicate that Louisa is feeling isolated in any sort of negative sense. Her imagined future of doing what she wants to do as long as she wants to do it has a peaceful feeling rather than an isolated one. So this answer is not grounded at all in the passage. And the best answer is A. Louisa had been quite troubled by the prospect of matrimony.